If a Glock and a 2011 had a baby, you might think it looked like this, but in reality it also looks like this. But that's just a 2011, you say, and well, yes and no. It's fully ambi capable, has a locking block and not a linked barrel, and it's the Miller Precision 9X. We'll compare it to the Bull Armory Tac Comp and the Staccato XC, and I'll tell you about all the crazy stuff that sets this apart from pretty much all other 2011s out there. Welcome back to the channel. I'm David and I'm pumped you're spending the time with me to learn about the Miller Ranger 9X. And if at any point you're getting value from this video, please consider subscribing. It does help the channel and I appreciate it. Starting with a disclosure, this is in fact a loaner gun. It's not my gun. I didn't pay for it. They sent it for me so I could learn about it and make a video on it. Doesn't mean I have to say anything nice about the gun. There are some negatives that I am going to tell you about. But generally the product is pretty airtight and rock solid, so there's not a lot I can say. But from an engineering standpoint, there's a lot of really cool stuff that's going on in this pistol, and if you're a nerd, you're probably going to want to know about it. So who is Miller Precision? They are a machine shop based out of Florida that has had 10 years of making parts for other people's guns, as well as aerospace that is stepping into their own gun that they're making. And their work is honestly pretty impeccable. They are a high precision machine shop, meaning that they're not trying to do the walk in the tolerance with hand fitting thing, but they were after designing the better gun and then machining it impeccably so the stuff just fits when it comes off the line. And this isn't my first foray into Miller products. My first experience with them was this Miller grip that I put on my Alpha Foxtrot Romulus. You can watch the video on how I glowed this thing up. But the grip and the trigger that came with it were very, very impressive. So I was very keen to try and check out one of their full builds. But there's a lot of stuff that's unique to this gun. There's a lot of parts that won't fit on regular 2011s that are in this gun, and I'll kind of unpack that for you. So first things first, Miller makes pretty much everything in-house except for some of the ignition components, which is similar to what Atlas does. They're making their own springs, which is important. We'll get back to that later. They're making their own grips, their triggers, their barrels, everything that you see on the pistol. Even their screws are made in their facility as well, which is kind of bonkers. Because of how the guns are machined, it made it so much more important that the design was really dialed in and the choices they made with that design. And some of the choices are honestly pretty wild. The first and most radical thing that they did on the gun was to use a locking block type system similar to a Glock, so the barrel is linkless. It's kind of like a CZ with an opening on the bottom rather than having the little peanut. It's just open on the bottom. The slide stop actually functions as the locking block. People often overlook the critical nature of fitting the barrel link to the slide stop on a 2011, 1911 style pistol. It's where most of your accuracy on the gun comes from. Their design gets them a lot of the same benefit of that link without all of the headache of actually getting it to be fit properly. So the barrel changes the relationship between the recoil spring and the hammer spring. Going back in time to when I was an open division competitor, I would use really heavy hammer springs and really light recoil springs. The first time you take it out of battery, it's a lot more difficult than every other time that the gun cycles with the hammer back. That's because the recoil spring is very light and the hammer spring is very heavy. That gets me the benefit of the hammer actually holding the barrel in lockup a little bit longer, and then the recoil spring kind of gently shoves it back into battery so the gun doesn't bounce up and down quite as much. Miller, because of their design, had to go a completely different direction where the recoil spring is actually notably heavier and the hammer spring is notably light. The first stroke on opening the hammer like that is not a lot different from every other stroke when you move it. You would think that that's going to create a gun that dips a lot in recoil, but I didn't observe that to be the case. The dot movement was very similar to a traditional 2011, and the way that they got at that was kind of unique. The springs that they use are variable pitch, variable diameter, meaning that the frequency of the coils changes as you stretch out the spring, but also like they get narrower as you come to the back of it, and the bigger side should go to the front on it. It's actually kind of critical that it does. If you've already got a 2011 or a 1911, you can actually get variable rate springs from Wolf Springs for your guns, and that's the kind of spring I use. I think they're fantastic. But because it's a different kind of action, the stroke length isn't exactly the same as it is on other 2011 style pistols. If you watched my old Phoenix Trinity video on the Evo, you know that that's got a longer stroke length. The Tanfoglio similarly had a longer stroke length. The Miller Precision actually has a shorter stroke length than a traditional government 2011 style pistol. And what that means is the slide doesn't move as far to the back. And usually what I find is that guns with longer stroke lengths are a little gentler shooting. This gun, I did not perceive it to have a shorter stroke length because it is so mild to shoot, but you can see it clearly in slow motion against the Bull Tac comp and the Staccato XC that the slide is traveling further back on those two guns than it is on this one. And another thing that we're starting to see on more 2011s is an external extractor, which is nice because the extractor is something that takes, maintenancing, and this takes a lot less looking after than a traditional internal extractor. And while I was holding the gun up, lefties probably noticed that it actually has a slide release on the right side of the pistol, and the mag catch similarly is swappable to the right side of the gun as well. So this is fully lefty friendly, which is pretty awesome. How do you know if somebody's left-handed? Don't worry, they'll tell you. I do want to talk about the grip and that mag catch, because that's another thing that's actually different. If you notice, it has a teardrop shaped mag catch, and there is no screw on this side of the mag catch, which means it's not a traditional 2011 style mag catch. There is actually a leaf spring inside the grip that retains the mag catch, very similar to what Glock uses, and that's how the spring is retained. And as a result, just the grip itself is a much smaller grip, like it's as small as they can make it while still taking 2011 magazines. The result is that I'm a little bit cramped on getting onto the grip. However, there's still enough space for both my hands to get there, but I can get onto the mag button no problem. And since it is a teardrop shape, super easy to get on there. It's a very, very usable grip. If you're somebody with small hands, you might check them out. But a super nice detail, and this needs to be the new standard for 2011s, but Miller actually uses Torx grip screws at both the top of the grip and at the front of the trigger guard. Torx is the way. I can't believe we still use hex head screws for these on traditional 2011 style guns. This is so much better. If you have ever taken the grip off your gun, you know what I mean. You can strip those wrenches super easy, and sometimes screws. It's terrible. I do want to spend some time talking about how this comp attaches, because it uses this like tri-lug attachment system. It's not really threaded on, it's kind of pressed on, then rotated to be retained. It's the most intelligent design for attaching a comp that I have run across. You may look at the top of the slide and be like, that's an island barrel. It's not an island barrel. That's actually machined into the compensator, but taking it off is just an eighth of a turn, and you pull at the end, and it's super easy to take off, but it doesn't move when it's on the gun. It's just very, very well machined. It's awesome. And you do have to take the compensator off the gun in order to get the barrel out of the slide to maintenance the gun. So it's a good thing it's easy to remove. Like, it's completely toolless. It's great. The fit on the gun is about like you would expect for a $4,400 gun. That's right. The gun is competitive with the Staccato XC. There is a very slight amount of wiggle at the rear of the slide. I can't even see. Yeah, you can kind of hear it a little bit. There's not a lot of movement there. When the hammer is up there, the gun doesn't move hardly at all. It's just super well fit, and the barrel doesn't deflect like at all. And the two-tone gun is actually a silver PVD with a black DLC on the barrel. And the grip obviously is anodized, but all the small parts are DLC coated. So the tuxedo gun is pretty handsome. Now that's a lot of nerd stuff, and you're like, that's really technical, but does it shoot good? Yes, it shoots very, very good. I was actually really pleased with how it shot. It feels like a fast gun, like a Commander style 2011, but without kind of the harshness. If you guys who shoot a lot of 2011s know what I mean. It doesn't really have the harshness of a Commander 2011, even though it has the shorter stroke. It shoots great. The grip module, as I mentioned, has great traction, so I can get a really good lock onto the pistol. And the fact that the screw on the grip doesn't like stick up like a lot of 2011s do is actually really nice. It just feels like I've got a great home on the gun. Now let's talk about the negatives on the pistol, and there aren't really a ton, but everything's a design choice, and on a compensated gun where the slide moves really fast, and keeping a gun reliable with a, very finicky slide speed, I think is best handled through the use of shielded safeties, which the Bull Armory Tac comp has. Some of the other guns that are like this have, but this one does not. So shielded safeties would be a good addition for a compensated gun. And what that's for is it keeps your thumb off the slide when the slide is cycling. You're just not going to slow down the slide any. I think that's really something that's necessary on these kinds of guns. And honestly, almost nobody does it. The proprietary springs that are in the gun is kind of a bummer, which means all of the springs to maintenance the gun, you have to get through Miller Precision, or I guess anybody who sells their stuff, but they're not going to be interchangeable traditional 2011 style springs. So it's just one more thing you have to keep your eyes on as you're maintaining the guns. Speaking of maintenance, I've developed an app called Carbon Buildup. It's in open beta phase now. These are the velocities with 5 off-the-shelf ammos I put through the gun. So, you know, there you have it. The app is really cool, and it ages all the parts of the gun kind of independently, so you know when the springs need replacing before the gun starts slowing down. And if something's going to break, you have it on hand before it does. And other than that, the only gripe about the gun is really that it's just kind of expensive. It feels like there's a lot of 2011 builders who have just kind of entered the market around this price point where, you know, the guns cost a lot of money. But I mean, I would say that yes, the gun is worthy of the price point that it is offering. It is a very well put together, very well thought out pistol. It just happens to cost a lot of money, which happens sometimes. But other than that, I really think that Miller's got a really cool thing going with the pistols that they put together. I do think that this gun could be a cool USPSA IDPA sort of hybrid pistol, meaning that if you just get the sight block that replaces this, you can shoot it as a compensated gun in IDPA and swap it for limited optics with the sight block. And that's pretty cool. They're also putting together smaller guns. This is like a proper Glock 19 sized 2011 because the grips are so much smaller. It feels really small. This is their Ranger 9 SC. I really like the size of this pistol. Follow the channel if you want more information on this. Otherwise, you can check out the glow up video on my Alpha Foxtrot Romulus. That was a fun one as well. As always, I appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.